hear that? Climate change has thundered on in the background for our entire lives. But listen, it's getting louder. I'm sure you all have noticed that the past few months have been filled with stark variations in the weather. We've had days of aggressive rainstorms, immediately followed by frigid temperatures, and those immediately followed by days of dry and scorching sunshine. This isn't how spring is supposed to go. Now, I've spent hours consuming documentaries and articles about the natural world, and when I first learned about global warming in middle school, I threw myself full force in pursuit of what I could do to help stop it. Back then, we were told that we could just reduce, reuse, and recycle our way to sustainability. But the truth is that climate change is worsening by the year, alarmingly quickly and with devastating consequences. In the Rio Grande Valley, we are already seeing the first traces of this. Prices for all items have risen simply because their component parts are harder to get. Temperatures are rising and droughts are worsening. For people without proper air conditioning, this could mean that summers could be even more deadly. According to a 2022 dissertation by Armida Rivera of UTRGV, microbes in the soil will also take damage from this climate shift, resulting in less nutrients available to plants and causing many to die. This not only will damage native populations of plants and animals, it will also cause heavy damage to our agricultural sector in the Rio Grande Valley, which is a large part of our economy. And with storms of all caliber growing stronger, you and I, your children, and your parents, we are all at risk of losing our homes, our savings, our health, and even our lives. We must change tactics to secure the future for our descendants. I believe the biggest action that we can take to help our ailing environment is to hold corporations responsible for their actions using economic and social strategies. I urge you to consider these options and take action. Time is of the essence. To begin, I will go over the problems we face and why we've struggled for decades to remedy them. Our first issue is that individual actions alone are not enough to affect climate change. According to the UN Emissions Gap Report of 2020, 2/3 of all carbon emissions are attributable to private households. This is a clear sign that we need lifestyle changes, and you can do so with actions including switching to a renewable energy provider, decreasing your home energy usage by switching to LED lights, eating more plant-based and locally sourced foods, and simply buying fewer products. Yet each person controls only their own lifestyle, meaning we need widespread changes to make even a dent in climate change. Add this to the fact that only a mere 20 fossil fuel firms are responsible for an entire third of all carbon emissions since 1965. That's only the top 20. It's clear that each of these corporations has more individual power than each individual person. Our second problem is that corporations are difficult for the average person to influence. They resist being controlled and are motivated by financial benefit, and they fiercely protect the profits of their investors and higher-ups. We've seen very little in the way of environmental policy changes in the past decade because of corporate lobbyists preventing action. There we go. Yet even when new regulations are passed, compliance costs are not passed on to the corporation. Oftentimes, they are pushed onto the consumer in the form of higher prices. What's more, fines for non-compliance are currently too weak to discourage pollution. Consider that plastic and oil corporations rake in billions of dollars in profits, and it's all too easy for them to just shell out a couple of $1 million in fines instead of actually changing. To delve deeper, the problems of a lack of corporate cooperation and a lack of individual power to create change are both fueled by big corporations' heavy involvement with the environment and their role as strong influencers of the government and media. Paradoxically, corporations are the main individual polluters of the entire world, while being dependent on natural resources for their profits. They're destroying the very thing that they need. Let's look at the first part of this. Corporations are the main users of natural resources, which fuel their operations. For instance, Coca-Cola has few qualms about profiting off of resources that others need. The beverage giant has several beverage plants in drought-stricken towns in Mexico. Not only does this worsen the water scarcity there, but they also have the audacity to sell bottled water, and more often soda, back to locals at a steep markup. Now let's look at the second part. Pollution occurs throughout the resource gathering and manufacturing processes. Mining contaminates groundwater. Chemical plants dump tons of waste daily into rivers. And factories with elevated levels of fuel burning cause acid rain. And this is common. Corporations have also secured their power in U.S. government and media long before today. They keep their hands in government operations by joining interest groups, hiring lobbyists, and funding political candidates. Large corporations also invest in media companies to sway what topics are covered and how they are presented to the public. In fact, as summarized in a 2019 opinion piece in USA Today by University of Pennsylvania professors Michael E. Mann and Jonathan Brockhoff, throughout the 1900s, oil giant BP first insisted that climate change was false, and then when they could no longer deny it, they pushed the narrative of individual responsibility for fossil fuel overuse and pollution via their infamous Prime Indian ads. This effort discouraged political support for carbon limiting legislation and kept their profits high. Luckily, we are not facing an impossible monster. Corporations may be the main single source of pollution and have strongholds in government, but there are economic and social actions that we can take that can result in their compliance. Our first is economic strategies. These are often an effective spur to motivate big corporations to action. Boycotts work for Cesar Chavez, and if organizers spread their movement on social media, then it creates buzz about the topic and pressures the offending company to speak out on the issue. Increased taxes are also a strong motivator for corporations. Taxes on polluting corporations will be effective if they are combined with government-imposed price ceilings, which will limit how high prices of a product can be raised to prevent customers having to shoulder the burden of costs. And speaking of compliance costs, a journal article by the nonprofit research institution Resources for the Future states that regulatory environmental laws actually impose lower costs on the companies than industries report. Another proven solution is a financial reward for compliance, usually in the form of government subsidization of the adoption of new environmentally friendly hardware and procedures. Economic actions alone, though, won't be enough, and they likely won't be implemented without social actions taken by informed consumers in support of them. Corporations may have their hands in politics, but citizens have the final say. With a whole host of national and state level elections happening in 2024, I challenge you all to research the candidates and find out what corporations are backing them. Then choose what corporations you prefer to influence politics. You can find your candidates' funding sources at opensecrets.org. With this information, we'll have deeper insight into what sectors might receive favor from these candidates. Let's not forget that although long and costly, legal fights can and have been won against big corporations' environmental damages. Take, for instance, the 5 U.S. states who sued oil giant BP over damages from its 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Although it took them 7 years to receive recompense, their effort awarded them a grand total of $18.7 billion. There need not be entire states involved to win legal battles either. In 2021, 4 farmers and an environmental lawyer sued the oil giant Shell due to damages accumulated by Shell's Nigeria subsidiary. The 5 sued Shell at courts in the Netherlands, where its headquarters was located. And guess what? They won. With these options for economic and social action in mind, allow me to review. The most effective action we can take to help slow climate change is to hold corporations responsible for their actions, using economic and social strategies. You now know that corporations have the wealth and power to exert massive impact on the issue, but are resistant to changing the practices that put us in such deep climate trouble. Nevertheless, we can motivate corporations by implementing systemic change. Big businesses may have the end goal of making money, but we can't let them sacrifice the world to do so. We've already been doing our part. It's time for big businesses to do theirs and silence the storm of disaster before nature's sacrifice becomes our own.